I grew up I went to school with Andy Goodman, who was murdered in Philadelphia, Mississippi, on a freedom march with Jamie Camden on August 20. And I had been on a freedom march in Chestertown, Maryland before. I was lucky enough to be there the week that it wasn't attacked by the sheriff and the mob. And that was Maryland, and I didn't have anybody who I was very close to at the time who said, Jimmy, you gotta go to Mississippi. So I knew it was scary. I debated with myself, I didn't go. 6 weeks into the summer, and he was dead. And for a long time, if I had had the capacity to organize the taking out of the sheriff of Philadelphia, Mississippi, I would have done so without batting an eye. And I will just say about this movie, if you think the slave owners who did these horrific things, and they did them and affected many, many people. If you were white and you went and they killed 80 union organizers in Birmingham in the 1930s. About half of them were black. And they just had a law where the sheriff didn't like you, they'd take you out and kill you. That was the law in the South, and the Democratic Party had FDR as president, but FDR wouldn't pass anti-lynching legislation because he had a vice president named Garner. And if you think that this didn't have very significant other effects, like this persecuting the half-black unit, the folks who went and fought for the Republic in Spain, the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, you'd be making a mistake. So one of the things is that we tend to see this too much communally. You imagine any of this. You imagine Jews as slaves in Egypt, and frankly, you will not get a real popular feeling about the Pharaoh. So the God who comes along and says, takes the firstborn of the Egyptians, that's not a good God. Firstborn didn't do nothing. But the fact is that there's a real deep grievance there. And it is best to, this is just a basic way of thinking about it, put yourself in the position of women who have to walk across this campus at night before you sound off about how wonderful, how far we've gotten about his work in the United States, for example. Now, about this fellow in Los Angeles, I listened for an hour to the Randy Rhoads show the other night, and she had about 7 or 8 bullets more. One guy who was a disc jockey, he said, when I was a kid, I'd go out on the street, and if I went out on the street by myself, the cops would come up and they would beat me. So it was safe for me to go with a group of kids. But if there were a group of us black kids, we'd be hanged. They might shoot me. Now, if you think about that, and you think about the treatment of poor blacks, and you think about the fact that Barack Obama, he led the Chum gang, he knows about marijuana. And a great number of people in prison found him 3 grades of marijuana, and a huge number of black kids are in prison. And they have dishonest searches and seizures in black and Chicago areas, the police do, which the Supreme Court approves of. Michelle Alexander described as the bottom of the way. Well, why ain't Barack Obama, for Christ's sake, really doing something about marijuana and doing something about all this sentencing? How come Ron Paul talks about it, Barack Obama doesn't? Well, Barack Obama is the leader of the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party has now quite a number of middle-class blacks who have succeeded very highly, and he's a good guy, but there's an edgy relationship with those poor kids. So one of the things about this is that if you take all these people who phoned in, they said they were sympathetic to Dorner, who had been fired from the police for saying that this woman kicked an old guy on the ground. They cleared the woman who was accused of cop, and they threw him off the force. And they talked a lot about the racism of the Los Angeles police. And if you listen to that, there was no doubt that they all wanted this guy to get away. Now, if, as accused, he shot the daughter of a guy who did him wrong, I'm sorry, this is not on the planet as far as sanity goes, right? So, murdering people is really not a good solution to this problem. It's not a political solution, and he's apparently ended up dead. But the issue of whether you have a movement which makes the Los Angeles Police Department clean with regard to racism is a huge issue. And the sympathy for him comes out of the fact that the LA Police Department has murdered and beaten a lot of ordinary people for so long that when people look at that, who have suffered that, they don't just, side with the cops.
Maybe I want to say something about love.
Okay, well, okay, we'll shut up.
But just quickly, I want to mention that on violence against, Hans Fanon, I think, has the best analysis of this kind of violence that you're referring to. And also, I would recommend another film by Conte Gerbo, The Battle for Algiers, which actually shows, in cinematic terms, the origins and deeper etiology of violence on both sides. It's a great film, just like that film Burn is. And if you haven't seen these films, you should. That last scene you mentioned, the rape scene, there are so many details there, and you picked up a very important detail there, dropping the stick, and this film has to be seen over and over again. But about love, I think that is what saves this film from being a pastiche. The postmodern form, which is just too entertaining. There is that scene where King is actually telling him the story of Siegfried and Brunhilde. And that establishes also the relationship, not perhaps of love, but really of intimacy between the two men, black and white. So there is a lot more than meets the eye in this film. And I think much of it is unintentional. Yeah, I don't give Tarantino that much credit for being so insightful. in love, actually, the movie succeeds in spite of itself, which is much to the credit of the actors and actresses. But thank you for bringing it up.
It's a brilliant touch, by the way, that the white hero was a German. You understand? Given the imaging from